Hello, welcome to Undercover. I'm your host, Kevin Bousquet. I'm a licensed private investigator. We're going to be talking a little bit today about domestic investigation. This is the area of investigation that people mostly familiarize themselves with when they think of private investigators. You know, throughout my career, when people I've introduced myself to someone or I've met someone and they say, I tell them, or I have to tell them that I'm a private investigator, one of the things they instantly think is that, oh, you're one of those people that follows wives and housewives and does all sorts of things for the divorce court. And, you know, throughout this program, what I've tried to do is I've tried to convince the public that domestic investigation or following spouses really represents a small portion of what private investigators do. Primarily what private investigators are involved in is insurance work or private fraud work, commercial fraud, insurance fraud, that type of thing. But today, I guess I'm going to have to play into the stereotype because a lot of the feedback we've had from the show, people have been asking questions about domestic investigation, wanting their spouses followed, wanting their teenage sons or daughters followed, wondering what they're doing when they're not at school, that kind of thing. So I've brought in a very special guest today, someone who I've known for many years, who I have hired to do surveillance work for me, not so much domestic work. His name is Alan Brick. He's with Blue Star Investigation. And Alan specializes in the area of domestic investigation surveillance, which we're going to get into. Alan, welcome to the show. Now, maybe can you kind of just, first of all, let's just do the basics. Can you tell us a little bit about your agency, how long you've been in business and who you're working for, that type of thing?
Well, my company, Blue Star Investigations, has been in business roughly for about 5 years. Okay. I've been in this business for about 13 years. Prior to Blue Star, I ran another company, which I eventually sold to my business partner and started up Blue Star. Okay,
so who's hiring people like you? Are you working for divorce lawyers, or are you primarily working for the public, or who's hiring you?
For domestic investigations, 90% of the time, it's the actual husband or wife who wants surveillance on their spouse.
Okay.
The other 10% is lawyers who their client doesn't feel comfortable dealing with a private investigator, so they've instructed their lawyer to hire me.
Okay, so now, I mean, in the beginning parts of my career, I did do some investigative, domestic investigations in the early 80s, so I know a little bit about domestic. I know a lot about domestic work, but correct me if I'm wrong, that if two parties want to separate, husband and wife want to separate, correct me if I'm wrong, we no longer have to prove adultery. It is no longer required that we go out and get photographs or video or that kind of thing to prove adultery. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
About 10 years ago, the government passed a law that if you want to get divorced and you believe your spouse is cheating, you're no longer required to get pictures or video of them cheating. You know, that has basically what it comes down to. It has no effect on your financial settlement these days if you're able to catch your spouse cheating.
Okay, so just to clarify, because I think it's important our viewers understand that if, for example, I catch my wife cheating and she's destroyed my family, the kids are being separated, she's with another man, and she has done all sorts of bad things, that when it comes down to the financial settlement, you're saying that it really doesn't matter who's cheating on who. It has no bearing, correct?
That's correct.
All right, so if I'm in a relationship that's failing and I want out of the relationship because my partner is cheating, all right, I can just leave, correct? I can leave and I can apply for a divorce? Is that how it's going to work?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's create a scenario. You know, my wife is acting differently at the house. She's coming in late. You know, she's having a shower before she goes to bed. Maybe she doesn't do that. I'm seeing all sorts of signals, that kind of thing, and I'm hiring you. So tell me what some of the signals are that my spouse may be cheating on me.
Some of the signals could be the sex life is not the same since you've noticed there's been a change. Okay. Another sign could be there's a financial situation where you notice that there's more activity on the credit card use and you don't know what the payments are for, okay, or there's money missing from the bank account. Other signs could be change of clothes. Your spouse could be taking an extra pair of underwear or clothes to work, and he or she comes home wearing different clothes, or when they do come home, the first thing they do is jump into the shower and they hide the clothes they're wearing.
Okay, so if I'm hiring, do we automatically just go right into a surveillance? Like, how am I going to set this up with you? Let's pretend that I have no idea, you know, how we go about finding that my spouse is cheating. So I come into your office, are we setting up a surveillance immediately? Is that how it's going to work?
Well, the first step is I meet with the client in my office.
Okay.
Preferably in my office, or I'll come see them wherever they would like to meet if they don't feel comfortable coming to my office. And we just discuss I would ask them questions like, what makes you think your spouse is cheating? They tell me their situation, how long they've been married for, when they've noticed a change in their marriage and the relationship. And then I would ask them questions, any idea who the other party could be, who they're cheating with. Sometimes it comes down, they have an idea it's a coworker, or it's a friend, or even a family member.
So let me ask you this just for fun. On the majority of situations where people think a spouse is cheating on them and they have that suspicion, what would be the percentage that almost for sure that spouse is in fact cheating by the time they've got to the situation? Look, I need to hire a PI to follow them. Is it high, or?
It's pretty high. I would say 8 out of 10 clients are correct that their spouse is cheating.
That there's some form of cheating going on. Now, one of the things, you know, I get the phone call all the time, and I would love to be able to help these people, but it's not something that I do, is that there's this whole thing now with internet dating. You know, there are websites, Lava Life, Plenty of Fish. People are meeting people on the internet with MySpace, Facebook.com, all of these other internet-based sites where people are, for the first time ever, are meeting on the internet and starting to arrange for dates and stuff like that on the internet. So let's say, for example, I've met a woman on the internet, or vice versa, a man or a woman has met a man on the internet or whatever, and I want to hire you just to say, look, I want to know a little bit about this girl. She won't give me her home phone number. She won't tell me where she lives. We've been chatting for almost 9 months now. We've had a few dates. Things aren't adding up. I think that I might actually be dating or pursuing a married woman. Can I hire you to do something like that for?
Actually, the past 10 years, the explosion of the internet has been huge.
Okay.
The past 5 years, our business has tripled with background checks on just potential mates that they've met over the internet. Mm-hmm. And what we do is, we need some information to work with, hopefully at least an email address, and if possible, we can have a phone number or an address or a name of this person, and we can do a background check to see if there's any fraud activity for that person, or confirm if they are or aren't married, if they have kids, what they do for a living.
Okay.
And we've had situations where the people we investigate on a background check over the internet is a teenager.
All right. I'm just reading off some of the things where I've gotten calls on domestic situations. So I'm going to propose another scenario. This is another one that I get into my office, is child custody issues. And this is where, in my career, I have seen more, slandering and bashing between the parties on child custody issues than ever before, where people just use anything they can to try and slander their spouse on the hopes that it's going to help them with a child custody issue. So let's say, for example, my spouse has a boyfriend, and I have to let my spouse see my daughter or my son every second day or on weekends. But I'm hearing stuff from the kids that maybe the person's drinking and driving with my kid in the car, the new person that my wife is dating, and stuff like that. Is there anything, or are we allowed to hire someone like you as it relates to child custody issues? Can I get you to follow my wife or my wife's new boyfriend and just see what's going on with the kids when I'm not there, just to make sure there's no safety issues or there's no child protection issues, things like that? Can I do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, legally you're allowed to do that. We do it all the time. We do surveillance on the children at the same time as the other spouse with their new boyfriend or girlfriend. And we've had situations, we follow the spouse with their new boyfriend or girlfriend, and the kids are at home, and the spouse and their mate are driving, going out to bars, nighttime.
Leaving the children at home?
Sometimes leaving the children at home unsupervised, sometimes with another friend or family member or a neighbor or an older sibling who's sometimes 14, 15 years old.
So domestic investigation, then, the work you're doing also relates to child protection issues, right? It's not just about, when people think of domestic investigation, they're always thinking it's all about spousal cheating, it's also relating to, which is probably one of the very important things, is child protection issues, correct?
That's the common stereotype is we just follow cheating husbands or cheating wives, but we also do teenage activity checks, see what your teenager's up to. If you don't know, they spend a lot of time out of the house and they don't tell you much, so we could see who their new friends are, where they spend their time, or if they're sitting in a park drinking.
So how are you dealing then if you're following a kid, all right, a child or a teenager? How are you dealing with the issue? Because I figure, I mean, I've done my fair bit of surveillance in my life. I mean, it's easier to follow someone in a car than if I'm following a teenager that's going on a bus and stuff like that. How are you managing to do these teenager surveillances? How's that working out? How do you?
Well, if we know that they're going to be either walking or taking public transportation, we always tell the client to do this properly. I need to use 2 investigators with 1 vehicle, and if they are on the bus, 1 PI goes on the bus, the other PI follows the bus and the PI at the same time.
So it's going to be probably 2, if it's a foot surveillance, it's going to be 2 PIs?
That's right.
And I'm suggesting that's going to be expensive, probably very expensive?
It does get pricey, but we try to keep the cost down for the client and give them a break on the second PI.
All right, now, most of these divorce matters, these family court matters, these support, custody, maintenance, equalization matters, all of these matters that come into play in the family court and in the divorce court, I know for a fact that they are primarily paper lawsuits. There is very little trial. There's just a lot of arbitration, mediation, pre-trials, you know, trying to mediate something where we're getting into a settlement where we're not going before a judge and having a big trial. Have you had any difficulties getting your photographs, your video, your evidence into any kind of a family proceeding or a divorce proceeding at all?
My company, we've never had an issue because everything we do when we do surveillance is legal.
Okay.
You know, we're always, wherever the surveillance is, we're always in a public place.
Okay.
And we're shooting video or pictures from our car, which is on public property, so we're allowed to present our evidence.
So if my wife's out with my kid, and I know for a fact that he was left, let's say he's under 12 years old, and he or she was left in the house where they went out on a date, or alternatively they were drinking and driving with the kid in the car, or there's just some form of a child protection issue. There's no problem getting your evidence into court, like as far as presenting it in some form of a motion material or affidavit evidence or anything like that?
I personally have never had an issue. There's been situations where the other party's lawyer has tried to fight our pictures or video or reports.
Okay.
And we always tell our clients, we can't control what the judge's outcome,
okay.
But if need be, I tell my clients we will testify in court to what we saw as well as our evidence that we give to them.
Now, you know, one of the things the whole industry, whether not just private investigators, but forensic accountants, even lawyers, we're all having, you know, the new privacy laws that are coming out. Are you struggling with anything to do with the privacy legislation as far as getting your photos in, taking the photos, that kind of stuff? Have you experienced any challenges yet?
Personally, we haven't experienced much challenges. You know, the stuff, like I'm repeating myself, is the pictures, the video we take is all done on public property. So I personally have not had any issues with that.
All right. Now, let's talk about some of the stuff where I've hired you in my career, and most commonly we've done a case together which involved salesman surveillance, where I had a corporate client. We're jumping off track here, but where I had a corporate client, and he had a partner who was kind of running around on him, corporate partner, running around him, doing calls on his own, starting another business on my client's time. Do you get a big call for the surveillance stuff as far as, I call it salesman surveillance, or just trying to find out what my business partner's doing on the side, stuff like that?
Yeah, we do a lot of that. It's not always salesmen, it could be employees of your company. We actually did one a few weeks ago for a plumbing company. They have plumbers that they supply with them, a plumber's truck, all the equipment. All the plumbers have to do is they get calls, go service this house or this business, fix whatever needs to be fixed. And I received a call that they had an issue with one plumber in particular. His production was down, and we never had that many calls that he wouldn't finish the calls that they would give him that day.
Okay.
So they called us. We did surveillance, and the first day we were doing surveillance, we presented. After the first day, I met with the client, and we showed them pictures and video of him working at certain establishments. Some of the establishments were my client's customers. Then there were some other customers that he went to that they did not know about.
So he's doing jobs on his own for cash and not putting it into the company, right?
That's right. Basically, it was his own customers. But the biggest issue was not just he had his own customers, but he was doing it during his business day, as well as when he would service his customers' needs, and they would need certain parts to repair whatever needed to be repaired.
Yes.
He would use his boss's parts, and it turned out he would also charge his own clients for these parts, and the parts were supplied by his employer.
Wow. Okay. Well, let me ask you this question, because people always get intimidated when they hear about surveillance. Could you have gotten that information any other way than doing surveillance on this guy? Because I mean, he's probably not putting the money in any bank account. He's probably working for cash. Could you have done it any other way, or is it your opinion that the only way you could have got that result is through doing surveillance? Would you agree with that statement?
Oh, definitely. The only thing we could do on that situation would be surveillance.
Now, another thing that we did together was a matter where we had situations where employees of a company, which was a warehouse, they were drinking on lunch, and then they were going back and were using machinery, forklifts, tow mowers, that kind of stuff. And we did a surveillance together where you were actually identifying how much people were drinking on their lunch and then going back to the company and using this equipment contrary to stuff with the workman's compensation issues, that kind of stuff. When you are you allowed to follow a unionized person? Because sometimes I get nervous doing surveillance and people that are part of a union on behalf of an employer. Are you allowed to follow people that are unionized?
Yeah, we're allowed. Okay. What it comes down to, if we're able to catch them, for example, drinking on the job or during their lunch break, in a unionized environment, sometimes it is harder for the employer to actually fire their employee when they catch them. Okay,
good. Now, where can we find out about you? Got a website? Can you tell us if we want to hire Blue Star? What's the website?
BlueStarPI.com.
BlueStarPI.com, and you're located in?
Head office is in Toronto.
Okay, and you're doing stuff all across Ontario, all across Canada. You've got operatives out there, stuff like that. So.
Yeah, we can cover any surveillance or any investigation across Canada.
Okay, there you have it, folks. Our show's been on domestic investigation. My guest has been Alan from Blue Star Investigation, and I hope you got a kind of a full circle kind of picture of the real world of domestic investigation, which accounts for a very small portion of what PIs do here in Canada. My name's Kevin Bousquet, and you've been watching Undercover. Thank you very much for coming.